Good afternoon, folks. I really always want to say good morning when we start the show, but I forget we're doing it right at noon. So we're the top of noon, man. How are you, bro?
We do our little banter before we jump on, and that starts in the morning. So it's
For
tough
sure.
to flip the switch.
Right. And my banter is always extra fun when I get to tell you how I need you to move around in your environment and get to mess with you. So you look decent today. Your new house is immaculate.
Yeah, you like that? The grand piano just came in last night. I got it just in time for today.
I bet you can't play one tune on that thing.
I'm pretty good at chopsticks.
Yeah, everyone's pretty good at chopsticks.
Folks, not like me.
Folks, welcome to another Thursday Thoughts. We're super excited to have you. As always, make sure you're liking, commenting, sharing the show, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. We got a fun show. It's a topic that I love, hate, hence the title, but we're going to jump right into it. Welcome to another episode of Thursday Thoughts. Lego. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thursday Thoughts. Zach, James, and Kevin Homer here with you. Excited to have you as we introduce you to some amazing people, thought leaders, and tastemakers in the world of marketing and surrounding. You know, folks come here with some awesome topics. I really enjoyed our last show, Kevin, when we were talking about neurodiverse hiring. I think that was an awesome show. Really opened a lot of eyes. We've actually gotten some emails and some new relationships since doing that show.
We got a lot of feedback. Such an important topic, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got to top it now. I don't know if that's possible, but you know, we can try.
I don't know. I think this guy's going to come pretty close.
Indeed, I know for sure because who I'm bringing on is a buddy of mine, and I want to jump right into and introduce you to my guy, Ryan Pereus. Not Pereus, it's Paris, pronounced just like the country. My man Ryan is the CEO and founder of Superhuman Prospecting, a firm that helps businesses grow through marketing research, cold outreach, and sales ops services. Superhuman Prospecting, check this. He started in 2017 with 3 team members. He's already grown to over 60 team members, servicing 70 to 90 clients every month. Superhuman Prospecting was ranked 16th out of Philly's 100 fastest growing companies in 2021. Major props to him. And he is also the founder and principal consultant of H2H Sales Scripts, which is human to human. And this is the cold calling scripting methodology used to construct sales conversations that are relevant to the 21st century. Ryan is also super passionate about soccer, and he's the founder of Philadelphia Heritage Soccer Club, a men's amateur and semi-pro soccer team here in Philadelphia. And of course, as I know, he's also a proud member of the Bridgeport Bike Gang, which consists currently of me, Ryan, and a 15-year-old girl named Daphne. And quite possibly my brother Oscar and sister Laura will be allowed in. I haven't initiated them officially yet, but you never know what can happen. But this is my man Ryan Pereus on the show. Ryan, say hi to the folks.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I thought we weren't supposed to talk about the bike gang. That was just Bridgeport.
I mean, we don't have the Fight Club rules on Bike Gang.
That's true.
You know, as we look to expand our reach, again, we're two dudes and a team, so we need to bolster a little bit.
We need to grow. Yeah, and should I say neighbor as well, buddy and neighbor?
Yeah, so, man, right up the street. Indeed. Kevin, I know you're jealous. We get to hang out and sip on whiskey every now and again, and you're just far away in Phoenixville, so sucks for you.
I'm a little jealous of you, Zach, and I'm sorry for Ryan.
Hey, man. I'm living a delusion that I'm okay with so far, so all good.
Well, this is awesome, man. I'm super excited to have you here, Ryan. I've been in the cold calling space for a long time. As many folks may know, I used to work for the Nets basketball team from 2008 to 2014. I couldn't even try to guess how many calls I made. There was a period I was asked to make 100 a day. I never hit that quota. I was always much more of a conversationalist than I was a dialer on the phone, but it actually worked out well for me. So I have an interesting love-hate relationship with cold calling. I'm very much a relationship building type salesperson, but I wanted to get a little bit into, as we get started, sort of what cold calling was and sort of what cold calling is now, because it's evolved a lot. I tell you, when I first started with the Nets, and again, this was only 2014, or I'm sorry, 2008. This wasn't that long ago. I was in a room with 10 other sales folks, no windows. Everyone had a dial-up phone with, we had the whole cord attached to it. And there was 2 computers in the front of the room, and we had a phone books. And it was go through the phone book, start calling folks. If you get something good, log it in the computer. That's how cold calling was for me. But tell a little bit, people, about your history with cold calling and sort of how it's evolved to today.
Yeah, it sounds like you were in like the boiler rooms of like Glengarry Glen Ross or something like that.
Pretty much.
Dating yourself there. Yeah, it's definitely changed. And I think it's not just about kind of the technology, but also the way we speak to people, But to start off, like technology has obviously transformed the way that we, do cold outreach. It allows us to focus on the conversations and not have to worry about flipping through a phone book and doing a lot of the manual processes. So I think there's some words, in the industry such as like velocity, and really building as many leads as possible in the top of your funnel. And, you use a variety of methods to do that. So while you're calling, there's also emails going out and all sorts of things for the sales development rep. So that's one change, that you see today. The other is, I think, how we talk to people. For whatever reason, cold calling has a really negative stigma to it, and maybe just sales in general. But I think, back in the telemarketing days in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of kind of scams going on and sleazy sales techniques that really ruined the entire marketplace and their perception of these calls that they were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was scams or false claims or really kind of coercive techniques to try to get the customer's dollar. And I think that's kind of where the phrase cold calling is dead, which, Zach, I'm going to try to make sure that it's very well and alive for you after this call. But that's where that came from, I think, and from our research. So the idea is that, people are just kind of sick and tired of being sold something and feeling like they're being sold. And so you can't talk to people the same way now. You have to be, what I always say to my team is I don't mind that the folks know it's a sales call. I just don't want them to feel like it. I don't want them to feel like they have some kind of angle or they're trying to fake get to know them when really they just want their money. And so I think trust and transparency and slowing down the sales process in their mind is how it's changed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And for me, even though I kind of I guess felt that, I never really looked at it from that lens of actually seeing it laid out and explained. Kevin, you can contest. When I started working with Kevin in 2018, I came on board to do sales, and I didn't really have a science behind it other than building relationships. So when I tried to go to the cold calling, it was not successful. I didn't know what to say with the folks I was talking. I didn't really have a script, which I know we'll talk about that later, or at least a well fleshed out one. And I realized, like, listen, I'm only going to be successful if I go out here and meet people face to face and build relationships, because that was my strength. And I know there's a lot of hurdles that come when you can't really do it to that level. So I really want to transition into talking a little bit about these cold calling challenges. I have some that I'll definitely want to touch on, but I know there was a couple that you mentioned. This was, what can someone do to prepare for success as a sales development rep, someone coming into a cold calling position? And, what would these reps watch out for as they venture in cold calling? And I'm sure we'll branch into more. But let's give folks a little bit of texture as, like, what are those challenges that come with being in this cold calling space today?
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of, cold call reluctance where, they want to get on a call. They have the desire, but they just can't pick up the phone. And I think there's, the fear of rejection. It's that one conversation in business that's unlike any others. It's the call from 0 to 1. It's that first step before you even start a relationship. Anything after that is a lot easier because they know your name, they know what you're about. There's a little bit of trust or rapport built. And so it's easier to take those at different levels, and it'll never be a cold call again, once you first meet someone.
Right.
So how do you crack that? And that's where the challenge is, because most folks aren't used to talking to strangers, and we're actually told not to talk to strangers when we're younger. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. I think it's the rejection, right? And taking a lot of the things that are being said to you, to heart as personally. And so those are some of the really early on challenges. Once you start, there's also challenges in the performance, in knowing what is going to work and getting it to work consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a one-on-one laborious role, right? Like the 100 calls a day. I was thinking about that. I was thinking, well, they probably didn't make 100 calls a day, Zach, because you were probably getting into conversations and having 20-minute conversation with people,
Right.
Once you got on the phone. So how can you make 100, right? And that's obviously the amazing place to be. But, can you convert the right number in 100 calls? Or are you just, even if you have the ability to call and you're not afraid, is it making it worth it for you?
Right.
So I think those are some of the challenges that make it difficult in the beginning, especially for new folks, or even if you're a seasoned sales executive, who needs to start cold calling, in a tough market, can really come up with those roadblocks and kind of stop the whole process.
Yeah. For me, the biggest challenge for me in cold calling was the rejection.
Yeah.
I did not like being rejected, or someone really and the rejections when I would make the calls were almost personal, like coming from them. They're like, it's me that ruined their day, or interrupted whatever, and like that weighed on me. It was almost like a mental health thing. Like after a while, it was like I got tired of hearing that. I enjoyed longer conversations because I was putting more distance between the no's, and I say no nicely. Like the no's didn't come out as no, thank you. They came out a lot sharper than that. Shout out to one of my old colleagues, Wally Reed. I remember he had a curse out checklist, and he would check out how many times someone cursed at him, and he would then go outside after like 20 or 30 and just scream. Like that kind of stuff really weighed on me. So that's, I think, for a lot of folks, especially folks who cold called 2010 and earlier, let's just say that, I think they got to some degree traumatized by that experience. Is it like that still today? Like even with you and your team, do they still deal with that sort of backlash when they're calling? Because I know they're starting the conversations probably a lot better than I used to, but like, are they still dealing with that?
Yeah, good question. I would say, we call primarily in the business to business space. I'm not sure if that's what you were calling into.
We were direct B2C with we were selling season tickets to a really crappy team.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might be a little different story. I think sometimes B2C, and I haven't had as much as experience. About 5% of our clients at any time are B2C. And typically there's a different situation where it's not completely cold for B2C. So the experience I have had, the B2C can be a little bit more personal because you're calling their home, right? That's the final stop, where if you're calling their business, there's a kind of layer of protection between the business and them. And I think sometimes it can be a little bit more personal, but so I don't know if I can comment on the B2C. I think people are people, and if they're fearful or scared or something, they're going to sometimes react, on instinct and as a defense mechanism. I would say in business, you still get that. I've been told to, get an effing real job, just go walk off a bridge, like, stuff like that, and it's definitely not fun, but I think that there's ways too to avoid those situations by the way we engage. And there's a little bit of a shift in, I think, I don't want to say like cold callers fighting back, but also standing your ground a little bit and helping them see that we're actually on the same level as you, especially in B2B. There's a little bit of a perception that if we're calling like an executive that, we're this low level individual, but it's really just how it's perceived. So, if we're able to make the call feel important, like we have something to say and they should listen, then they might not have that kind of lizard brain reaction as much. Or we can squelch it pretty quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that actually kind of parlays great into what I wanted to talk about next, were some techniques that can be used towards cold calling. And also, sidebar, my little clip art looks a lot like you. I just want to
Oh
point that
God.
out.
You have that
But
custom made. You sent my
yeah,
picture
I'll have him sent to you
to
afterwards.
Disneyland or
But let's jump
Pixar.
into some of these techniques. What are some, like this first one, what are some ways to stay motivated when you are cold calling and you're picking up that phone? What are some suggestions you'd have for someone in the sales?
Yeah. I think you have to kind of put yourself in a different mental space than a lot of other business practices that you're maybe going about on a day-to-day basis when it comes to relationships. You have to think about it more like a problem to be solved and like a code to be cracked than necessarily, I have this person is either going to like me or they're not, and I better perform, because that puts a lot of pressure on yourself, and it's a completely false sense of what's actually happening, right? The person that you got to think, the person that's picking up the phone is not expecting your call, right? They might be busy during their day. They might think it's a customer that's calling, right? And not someone trying to actually sell them something. So the position that they're in is a little difficult, position just from an empathetic perspective, right? But when you're actually considering the motivation, you can have a little bit of empathy and know, okay, this person doesn't really know me yet, but if I can say the right things, they might come back from that, and we call it diffuse the salesperson stigma, and slow the process in their mind so that they can actually have a conversation with me. So I'm looking at it more like a little bit of a game or a sport rather than a personal relationship that is dependent upon whether or not they like me.
Gotcha.
So if you can take that perspective, and it's like you're entering into an arena or a boxing match or any sport, then you have more of a competitive, goal-oriented focus than that personal. And so that keeps me motivated, because now what I can do is I can start having fun with it. I can say, hey, I'm going to try this line this time. Last time the person seemed a little down. I'm going to try this joke if I hear that again. And you can kind of try those things and see what works.
Right.
And it's the constant kind of learning that can also give you motivation. The fact that you have the ability to convert this person if you do say the right thing, and you can read them appropriately. Does allow for growth within your skill set.
For sure. And I think that's a huge part of being in the sales world and being successful over a long period of time, is that consistent growth. I know when I was there, we had some sales trainings, but I didn't really spend much time outside of work personally growing. And then actually, since I've been a consultant and been on my own, like I've been put onto so many books and so many audio books from folks like yourself and Kevin and others. And like, it's mind opening. And I actually have evolved how I work with my relationships and people I'm doing business with, and more from a conscious standpoint. I feel like I was always kind of good at it, but now I can consciously be better at it. And I've noticed, success in that space.
Mm-hmm.
One other area I want to touch on, getting in a slump, because I've been in slumps. I've seen people in slumps. I've seen people get fired because they couldn't get out of slumps. What recommendations do you have for someone in the sales space who's slumping?
Yeah. So one of the things, and this goes off of what we just spoke about, which is, you're always trying something new, and you always have room to improve. And so if you have, some level of success at any point, or you're starting to see that it has worked for you, obviously that can really charge you up, but you can also stay on that high. And when things aren't going as well, it can really drag you, right? Because you're on this high, and now you're kind of feeling that complete opposite. So there's something to be said about consistent measurements or benchmarks that allow you to reevaluate every milestone. So let's just say, take 500 calls. Like, what's going to happen with these 500? And if I'm having some indicators that it's going to be positive, then I'm going to keep going. But if it's a target I really want, or an area that I really want to be successful at, but it's tanking, then I might not take it past more than 500, because I'm realizing, it's not necessarily a bad thing to put your foot in the door into hell, but I'm not going to continue walking through it if I have the option to step back out. And
Gotcha.
so I think if you have those benchmarks set for yourself, once you get to it, you're not committed. It's not you. Step back, take a breath, and maybe change a variable. And I think that's the other thing with slumps is that we can get really connected to one idea that this has to work or else I'm a failure. And the really interesting thing about cold calling, unlike any other channel, I would argue that has more variables to it than any other marketing or sales channel.
Right.
You know, and so we can. The positive to that is we can change one of those variables. So, hey, I'm calling on this list, and I really want to be successful. Maybe I tweak my script a little bit. Maybe I change the time of day that I'm calling. Maybe I change my demographic or my target list. Maybe I talk a little different about the product that I'm offering. You know, maybe I try some different skills. So, and there's all dozens of other subsets of, variables within those that I just mentioned.
Right.
So those would be a couple of things that I could think of.
Awesome. Yeah. When I was selling, and I think this works for B2B too, one of the variables that I found worked for me that I really leaned into was getting personal and I would ask folks, hey, how are you doing? And typically they would go, fine. How are you? As soon as they ask me how I am, I'm telling them about how I am. Like they got to learn who I was. And I'll admit there were some days back then where I made some stuff up. I used to get sympathy by telling them I'm actually not doing great. I actually just spilled coffee all over my shirt. So I feel kind of like a putz, but I'm here making calls. And they were embraced by that. They were like, oh, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. My ego's hurt. Folks are looking at me across the sales room, but like it broke down the barriers and the combo started. What'd you say, Ryan?
Oh, sorry. I was just like, what can I buy from you to make you feel better?
Yeah, right. I never was what the next statement, but sometimes it works. Sometimes it definitely works.
That's great.
That's great though. I mean, it softens things up for that conversation starter, but it also annoys the hell out of me when, why does every conversation have to start with, how are you doing? Good. How are you? Good. Like, I already know what you're going to say. This was a waste of time. Let's just jump right into it. I used to always laugh when people would leave voicemails and say, hey, this is John. How are you? Well, it's a voicemail. It's not like I can respond to you. Like, why did you bother asking how I am when I can't even say that I'm good or I'm bad or I spilled coffee on myself? Like there are certain things that are just so strange. So I love that approach, Zach, that, you're able to just like actually make a conversation out of it instead of just that requirement of, how are you? Good.
Yeah. Let me just get through these pleasantries so I can get to what I really want to talk about. Yeah.
Right.
But I think for B2C, it is a little different. I think to your point, Zach, I think that in B2C, like we do recommend having a little bit more of a personal approach. But for someone like you, Kevin, who is a business leader, you don't have time for that. And I think the more that we can get to the point and someone into a conversation, they kind of instinctively see that, okay, this might not be a waste of time because we haven't even talked about the pleasantries and we're already into the meat and potatoes of what we want to speak about. And I think that can sometimes garner more respect, especially in the B2B space. Yeah.
Gotcha. And we had one of the comments that I love to see pop on here from Kimberly Brock. Will this be available to watch again? Of course, Kimberly. We encourage you to watch it for folks who can't see it live. This will be on the Navitas Marketing Facebook page, YouTube page, LinkedIn page. So please check it out anywhere. If you're not already following us or friended or subscribed or any of those things, please do that as well, because we do these every month. We always bring some great folks in here to chat about really important topics. And we're always looking for people to come and be some of our presenters. So by all means, please check us out, Kimberly, and we hope to see you in a future episode, whether it be live or after we're live. One last thing I want to touch on here, Ryan, is dealing with rude folks. Sometimes you're calling, and again, I told you some of the issues I've had in the past, but like on that side of the phone, clearly you're not in a strict customer service space, but there's an element of that, and you can't always say what you want or react how you want. How do you deal with someone who is overtly rude on the phone to you?
Yeah, it's a tough one because at some level it can get personal, it can get disrespectful, and I've had difficulty with that sometimes, because they might say something that's completely out of left field that wouldn't be appropriate for really any conversation. So I think that, having that first of all, that mindset that, I'm just entering into an arena, and I'm not me, I'm like my game face is on. And so I can expect that a little bit. But again, it doesn't mean that we're not impacted. So I would say that, first of all, just try not to swear back, to your point. It's definitely a good starter. I think something that you can do is, there is a way to, sometimes some of that is the salesperson's stigma. So some of it to them is really just a fear, a reaction to a salesperson. And if you can sidestep and say, if they call you a name or something like that, you can kind of sidestep and you can even say, I'm sorry, that was disrespectful. I'm actually here just to see if you have a lead gen partner right now. And sometimes they'll come back with it if you stick with it, because you haven't left the phone call, right? And they're the one that kind of has pie on their face because you just took it and it didn't scare you off. So I think that is probably more of an advanced skill, because it does take some character to be able to withstand a punch like that and not kind of hang up yourself.
Right.
If you can withstand that, or if you can't withstand it, then hang up. Like, I don't think you need to be disrespected by somebody who is calling names or something like that. And they're probably not going to be a good partner for you to work with, right?
Yeah.
It's not really someone that we want to do business with, because imagine if they're talking to us like that now, what is it going to be like when they are a customer?
Right.
Kevin, I'm sure you're familiar with account management, being the position you are, right? And so you can kind of get a little whiff of what those folks might be like.
Mm-hmm. At least with account management, I mean, you've already got the relationship.
True.
So it does soften everything. You kind of know them a little bit better of, what to say, what not to say. But yeah, when you're cold calling and, starting from ground zero, I mean, it's tough, and you got to have thick skin. You almost have to, you never want to go into something thinking negatively. You kind of almost have to assume the worst, and then at least you can be, a little more prepared for it. One thing I was curious about, Ryan, what are your thoughts and what kind of prospecting and, upfront research do you do before calling somebody? And I know it's tough when you have that quota and you got to hit 50 or 100 people a day. That doesn't really give you much time to peruse websites and, look on Facebook or, whatever your process might be. But, I assume you got to find the right balance of, being prepared. I always laugh, obviously I own a marketing agency. One of the big things we do is we build websites. And, I don't know how many emails I get from people or messages on LinkedIn that say, I was checking out your website and I think we'd be a good fit for you. We can help you by building a new website. And like, well, if you were on my site and you saw what we do, then you know that I build my own websites. I obviously don't need your help. There was probably a different angle to try to get my attention. I'm just curious, how do you strike that, appropriate balance of prospecting without, spending too much time on prospecting?
So it's a good question, because there are a lot of different salespeople out there that are either watching now or, looking at the landscape of how sales positions work. And so sometimes lists they have to build themselves. Sometimes, they're provided for them. A situation like us, with Superhuman Prospecting, we primarily make calls, but we also have a list building service. So either clients can bring their own list or, we can build it for them. But, if you are, I would speak to just the person who's, the sales development rep making calls on their own and kind of responsible for that by themselves. Jeb Blunt, he's one of the big sales authors out there right now. He talks about the platinum hours and golden hours. And the platinum hours are those times between like 7 and 9 and between, 4 and 6 or 5 and 7, where it's outside of the calling times that you want to, use that time to build your lists. So I think prioritizing it so you're not spending your days doing that and you're spending your days in conversation, and then also finding the right tools. There's so much technology out there now, and this kind of goes back to the first question that Zach had talked about, which is how has it changed from then until now? Well, Yellow Pages is I guess a .com now, and I'm not sure how impactful it is, but if you're looking at businesses, there's so many tools out there now that provide lists, and you just have to know your profile, and that might take some testing. So obviously that person who was reaching out to you probably just didn't have no idea what you did. They just said marketing company or something, and they just did a random outreach, right? So I think like testing that and knowing and getting feedback, and then consistently refining it and doing it in those cycles, right? In those benchmarks. Hey, every 500 calls, we're going to stop and do an evaluation, and then rebuild a new campaign based on what we learned. So
awesome.
Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it was good.
Okay.
And if it wasn't good, I'm not going to call you out while we're live anyway.
Just tell me after. So like that.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk.
Solid response, Ryan. I want to dig a little bit more into your business and kind of cold calling as a service. So let's talk a little bit about this. So you have Superhuman Prospecting. I'm curious, when you have a client, first off, how do you gauge success? Yeah. And I mean, in doing cold calling as a service versus, again, a company having their cold calling sales team internally, how do you, how do you gauge success? And like, what are some of those, challenges you end up coming across?
So that is it's such a wide range, and it's difficult. It's difficult to measure success because ultimately what they're looking to do is grow their business, which means more money needs to come in the door for them, right? At some point. And what we do in our process to identify that, it actually happens even before they jump on board with us. So we really customize. We have very customizable packages for any type of business, from solopreneurs to enterprise. So we're really trying to identify their goals in the beginning. So maybe how many sales appointments do they need on their calendar in order to convert a certain amount of deals, so that equals revenue that can afford, the cost of a marketing service. And so we go through that practice with them even before they've engaged with us. So when they do choose, it's a little bit set up so that our guesstimate is that this amount will convert, right? And we try to under project and overperform there. So that's one way that we set them up for success. The other is kind of a belief and philosophy in one of our models for our pricing, and the belief is I believe, and whether I'm wrong or right for this, I don't know, but I truly do see this, that I believe cold calling can work 100% of the time if two boxes are checked, and one is it a product or service that is relevant or people want or need? Okay. Number two is, do people pick up the phone in that industry? And there's some that are not. And I, have to admit that sometimes cold calling does not work. An example is like black and white TVs, they're just not around. I don't care if you have Grant Cardone calling like Best Buy's, purchasing department. No one's going to be buying that, So it's like so irrelevant and outdated that it's just obscure and more of a collectible. On the other end of the spectrum with picking up the phone, one time we had a list someone gave us that had Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and like Richard Branson on it. And like, hey, call these guys to sell our service. And we're just like, okay, but you realize this is going to be impossible. They're like, just do it. You never know what can happen. And sure enough, you literally call the numbers that were provided, and it got to Facebook, and it said something like, hi, thanks for calling Facebook. It was an automated message. We do not receive phone calls. Please go to our website for more.
Yep.
So not much I can do there. But there's a happy space. And those are pretty rare, extreme examples, but there's a space in between that kind of says that if people pick up the phone and you have a product or service that's relevant and can help, then it's just a matter of finding those variables that can be a success. And that might take 1 month, that might take 6 months or more, just depending on where you are with knowing that combination of what we call the product relevance, the market, the message, and how well the SDR is trained.
Gotcha. And I guess kind of branching off that, what to you sticks out as a good person to hire in a cold calling space? Like, what are those qualities that a person would need, right off the bat to be successful? Clearly you can train them a lot and you can do some things, but what are those basic, hey, if you don't have this, it's going to be tough, but like you look for people with these traits?
Yeah. It's funny. It's not the typical, a lot of times, it's not the typical profile that you would expect of a salesperson, right? You know, if someone says, hey, describe a salesperson's personality, they think type A, you know, outgoing, very talkative. For cold calling, that's not always the case. You know, the person has to be a little bit more systematic and maybe a little bit more adept to follow a rhythm. And sometimes that means it's a little bit of a calmer demeanor. So I think demeanor and kind of their personality type has to be within a range that, you know, has the ability to match the other person on the other end. And that's not always the most outgoing person. So I think, you know, having that ability to be dynamic, coachable, you know, more of a character trait, you know, someone who's willing to learn, because part of this is just always finding out new information and being able to take that and apply it for the next level of success.
Right.
So they have to be open to information, whether that's from a book they read or an actual mentor or manager or coach that's helping them. That is very important. Like I said, it's very much like a sport or a game. So It's a couple of them. Yeah.
Gotcha. And before we head out of here, I do want to touch on one more element of your business. I know we mentioned this in your bio, but you're also the creator of human to human sales scripts. So tell us a little bit about scripts, if they are necessary. I'm assuming you'll say they are, since you have a company that provides them. But what is also that, you know, proprietary approach to script writing? You don't got to give us all the trade secrets of
IP. Yeah. It's probably my favorite part of the whole business and the reason why we started. When I was having success in 2013, 2014, when everyone was talking about digital marketing, and it was a huge wave of digital that was on the scene, and saying cold calling was dead. Like I was having success in a couple different companies that I had been working with, you know, in regards to cold calling. Like I was making calls and setting up meetings during this time. And what was so fascinating about it was tracking what was working. And so I'd kind of document and make notes about what was working. And I'm realizing I'm coming up with a script. And I was like, I got to say that again. I got to say this again. And so it just ended up being more of a playbook or a game plan every time I went into a call. And that's somewhat of how the beginning started, because I never wanted to forget how I had that success. And so I really just started when I got into the space. I was really passionate about sales and making a better name for it. And the way that I was meeting the market was, hey, I can be your copywriter for sales copy, whether it's for cold calling or email or sales presentations. And so that's kind of how the actual idea was started. But the human to human side is much more deeper, meaningful to me. And it has a lot to do with some of the things we talked about, you know, like some of the salesperson stigma that's out there against cold callers, and how to diffuse that and build trust back with the marketplace.
Yep.
You know, and also it's the other side. It's both sides. You know, they have to respect us and we have to respect them. So when they do kind of have some of that, you know, they apply that pressure or they give you some of that flack. I think, you know, knowing how to stand your ground and ensuring that they know that you're an important part of the process too. And if you would just be open to hearing me, we could potentially change your business or your life with what we have, you know? And so that's kind of where the human to human element comes in, and building trust back with them and kind of making a name for sales.
And just to be clear, so in the service you provide with a human to human, are you creating scripts for companies to use with their own sales crews?
Yeah, good clarification, because that's exactly it. So H2H sales scripts was the beginning, and Superhuman is kind of the brainchild. Is that a word? Is that it? Brainchild of H2H. So we would write scripts for other companies for their teams to use, and then we would train their teams on how to have cold calls relevant to the 21st century. And then it was always like, you know what, this caller didn't work. Would you be able to call this for us? You know, and that conversation started happening more. I was like, well, I could call it, but I don't have anyone more than me. And that's where we started hiring folks to make these calls using the scripts that we created.
Gotcha.
All of our team members now at Superhuman are trained on the H2H method. So we have a couple different like frameworks or structures that work based upon the type of market we're calling into. And then we have a whole method for writing and how many words should be said before a question. And we have multiple discovery questions. So it's more of a conversation rather than just like them getting pitched at. And so we use that same method, and all of our team members are trained on that method before they even go out to make any calls for our clients.
Awesome, man. Well, first off, let me thank you for coming on and dropping some sales knowledge and giving us some details about your business. I actually didn't know it was H2H first that kind of led into Superhuman. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm passionate about, connecting with folks and that element of the sales. And I will say after this chat, I'm not as down on cold calling as I used to be. So thank you.
All right.
For that, Ryan.
Mission somewhat accomplished.
Somewhat accomplished. Any thoughts towards cold calling before we start to wrap up, Kev?
I have two things I'd like to bring up.
Oh no.
Yes.
So
would you like a demo of Superhuman, Kevin? Is that the first one?
We'll talk offline about that too. So the first thing, I don't know if you guys have ever seen on ESPN, there's a show, Pardon the Interruption, and they spend a lot of time bantering about different topics of sports, and then at the end the host goes through and mentions any of the statistics or anything that was said incorrectly. So since we didn't talk sports today, I would just like to point out that at 3 minutes into our show, Zach was explaining how to pronounce Ryan's name and incorrectly said that Paris is a country. It is not a country. It is a city within a country. So I just wanted to call that out.
I hate you so much.
And the second thing I wanted to say, Ryan, great information. Thank you so much for joining us. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
I think everything you said was great. I got to say, I will admit that sometimes when it comes to your industry, I think the industry is getting a little bit lazy. Yesterday, somebody called me. They called my phone, sneezed, and hung up right away. And I got to tell you, I'm really getting tired of these cold calls.
Ah,
got it.
Zach always appreciates when I end the show with a good dad joke, so I
got it.
Let that one go.
See, Ryan, this is the reason why sometimes I just take him off the feed. I'm just like,
he's done.
Me and you close the show. He's done. One thing before we go, I want to make sure I let you all know about August 18th. Our good friend Hope Horowitz is going to be coming and talking about strategic communications and PR. She is a rock star in that space, and we can't wait to have her here next month. Any parting words, Ryan, before we head out?
Yeah, maybe, Kevin, besides a demo, we could talk more about dad jokes as well. I would like to pick your brain on some of those. It's good.
I don't know if we have enough time, but we can try.
I don't approve of any of this.
Hey, I'm always down. I gotta have these jokes for the call, man. Imagine saying that on a call.
It helped. It's funny. I was doing a little bit of research trying to find a good cold call joke to make. I will admit I don't always come up with the dad jokes myself. Sometimes I do.
It doesn't matter.
Everything I was actually coming up with was dad jokes to use as a cold caller to break through the barrier. So there actually are some good jokes out there if you do a Google search. You may have to add that into your H2H strategy.
Thank you. That would be amazing because I have yet to come across that resource. So
fantastic. Listen, great having you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Everyone watching, make sure you still like, comment, and share the show. And if you have questions for Ryan, you can always send them right in to Ryan or to us. We'll make sure we get them to him. And again, Ryan, thanks for dropping some knowledge on the Navitas family. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back here next month with Hope. Peace.